CS2 is unlike any other FPS, not only in the way we tactically approach the game, but also in the unique weapon mechanics. You see, most games you point, click, and the bullet goes where the crosshair is, but much like a teenage e-girl, CS2 is quirky. There are three things that we need to account for when controlling our spray. The first one is our movement. The more we move, the more inaccurate our shots will be, so it's important for us to be standing still as much as possible when we're committing to a spray. The second thing is the spread. This is an uncontrollable variable. If we use this command to get rid of the recoil pattern, you can see that all the bullets will go in this little radius here. This is theoretically the best spray pattern achievable, so at a very long distance, even with a perfect spray, our bullets won't be 100% accurate. And the third thing to account for is the recoil pattern. Each weapon has a consistent and unique recoil pattern, so in order for us to have accurate shots, we need to do the opposite movements to the pattern we're seeing, controlling the spray. So let's hop on a random map with a nice scenery, and make sure to tick the infinite warm-up and infinite ammo boxes before we load in. We're going to use the AK as an example, because a lot of people have said they're struggling with this gun in particular. And just a quick side note, if you go to your game settings and make sure this option is enabled, you can use this button on your keyboard to open up the console. From here you can type SV_cheats1 and then type SV_infinite_ammo2. Now we have infinite ammo, but our mag still needs to be reloaded. And we can change it back to the infinite mag with SV_infinite_ammo1. But yeah. You can see here that no matter how many times I unload on this wall, the pattern remains consistent. So with this being the case, it's a matter of repeating it over and over again and learning how to counter the movements to the best of our ability. I want to bring up a method of learning called deliberate practice. It was coined by a psychologist called Anders Ericsson, and it refers to a systematic and repetitive approach to learning and improving a skill. It involves breaking down the skill into specific components, practicing those components deliberately, and continuously refining and performing through repetition. And to relate that to spray control, we can split the pattern down into two segments. The vertical, which is pretty much just a straight line, and then the horizontal, which is the side-to-side movements. This is a good opportunity for us to make it a lot easier to learn. Start off by learning the vertical part of the spray. Begin with a 3-bullet burst, see where the bullets go, and then try and counter it. When you feel like you can control those 3 bullets, move up to 4, 5 or 6 bullets, and so on and so forth. It's important not to rush yourself though. When you're alone in a practice map, no one is judging you but yourself. You should give yourself some credit for loading into the map purely for the sake of improving yourself. What a guy. Once you get the vertical segment down, you'll be able to get every bullet to stay at head height, meaning that you can start learning the horizontal pattern. We'll again use this progressive refinement method by breaking the pattern down into each movement. So after we finish pulling down, the spray goes slightly to the left and then swings to the right. So let's forget about the rest of the pattern and learn how to control the spray up until this point here. As we're approaching the bottom of the spray, let's go a bit to the right and then swing to the left. Banging. Let's keep going. Now the bullets go to the left and then swing back to the right at the last second. Once again, to counter it, it's as easy as doing the opposite movement. So to recap, as we're approaching the bottom of the spray, we go a bit to the right, swing to the left, and then we should swing back to the right, stay there for a bit, and then at the last second we're going to swing back to the left again. Now, me saying all this is very confusing, and it doesn't mean much until you go into the game and drill it over and over again yourself. You need to get the feeling of it as well as the knowledge, and then over time they'll all merge into one seamless motion. A lot of new players will often be overwhelmed with the intricacies of a spray pattern, and because of that, they just won't learn it. But I don't think they realise how straightforward it is. With the 2-segment rule and the deliberate practice theory, you can honestly smash people's heads in and majorly have it. Lads, I'm sorry for interrupting the video here, but I just want to let you know that I'm drawing the giveaway winner from my previous video live on stream. I'm going to go live here on YouTube on January the 1st, 2024 at 3 PM UK time. I'd love for you to join me, and if you want to enter the giveaway, the deadline is midnight tonight. But yeah, I'm off. Enjoy the rest of the video. After you finish learning the recoil, give yourself a cheeky pat on the back. But it's not over yet. If we can only commit to one target at a time, we'll eventually run into some limitations. There's a more advanced technique that can actually help us with this, called spray transfer. This can be very difficult to do, and that's mainly because we don't know where to start in regards to practicing it, but I'm going to show you exactly how to do that. You can start off by loading into aim_bots, look up and shoot these 3 things, and then get rid of all of the bots but 2. Now, shoot the first guy with your first bullet being a headshot, and then flick to the second guy to finish off your spray. Since you're killing the first guy with the first bullet, the spray transfer should all take place within the first segment. And remember that it's a spray transfer. Once you've transferred to the second guy, the spray continues on in the exact same way. The transfer is done. We can again use this deliberate practice method in order to familiarise ourselves with this specific scenario. But there are limitless points during a spray that you might want to transfer, so once you feel comfortable doing it after this first bullet, try and go for only body shots. This way you can learn how to transfer your spray after 3 to 5 bullets instead of just the first one. And if that's easy for you, try adding more bots and see if you can work your way up to 5, which will force you to transfer during the horizontal section of the spray. There's a lot of creative ways to make it progressively harder for yourself, and since we don't really have access to many workshop maps at the moment, doing these exercises will give us that extra edge over our opponents. But whilst transferring spray is crucial in killing our opponent, our movement is impaired when we do it, resulting in us becoming an easy target for them. But something that people don't know is that your spray pattern continues even if you're moving. The shots are just more inaccurate depending on your velocity. So with that in mind, we can actually jiggle around a little bit to make it harder for our opponent to hit us, and it won't affect our spray too badly. For example, you can do this when spamming smokes. If you want to make the enemy eat lead, but you also don't want to get pre-fired, then you can keep shooting as you're moving around, and your shots will become fully accurate when you stand still again. But obviously we're not going to be spraying all of the time. It's something that has its time and place, so knowing when to commit to a spray is important. There are certain situations where our instincts just tell us to hold the spray down. Like if the enemy is rushing us on an eco, part of us feels like it's our time to get the ace. But you need to listen to the responsible adult in your mind. Committing to a full spray is something that should only be done when there's no other option. It's usually more beneficial to isolate fast and efficient 1v1s. Simply being out in the open for the amount of time it takes to fire a whole mag will likely get you killed in the first place. But in terms of when to burst and when to spray, I think it just goes without saying that you do what you find most comfortable and efficient. Obviously you don't want to be spraying across the map, but you're always going to be controlling your recoil either way, because after you stop shooting, there's a cooldown period in which your accuracy resets. So if you stop spraying and then start spraying again before your accuracy resets, you'll notice that the recoil seems really weird and uncontrollable. Well, that's basically because depending on how far the accuracy is reset, the spray you initiate will continue on from that point. And the same can be said if you're tap firing a little bit too fast. The gun will slowly start to form the first few bullets of the recoil pattern. This is something that takes quite a bit of getting used to, and I think it's designed this way so that we can't get used to it. So to overcome this completely, we want to make sure that the accuracy is fully reset before we start shooting again. This will instill a good habit within you. And speaking of habits, crouch spraying is something often regarded as a bad thing, and it can be, depending on how you do it. A lot of people crouch as they start shooting, but the intended way to do it is to crouch down with the spray pattern, in order to make the first vertical segment require less physical movement. And also, crouching makes your spread smaller, so your spray is going to be a lot more accurate overall. If you feel like you rely too much on crouching, I'd recommend hopping in a deathmatch, unbinding crouch and getting used to the feeling of not having to rely on it. This will require you to improve your spray control a surprising amount as well. Once you've grown more accustomed to it, rebind crouch and focus on the benefit it brings to certain gunfights, and not the habit that you can form around it. I put up a community post asking what you guys struggle with the most in terms of spray control, and oh my god, I've got a bunch of questions here. And as I don't want this video to go on forever, I'm gonna pick like 5 questions and make my answer as open-ended and informative as possible. Therefore, I'll be answering a bunch of questions as I answer one. So let's take a look at the first question. This guy's name is unreadable, but it's all good because we can read the question. They say that they have inconsistency issues from game to game, and if they miss their initial burst on a moving target, they can't control the rest of the spray. I completely understand what you mean, and honestly, I'm going to prescribe you this map. Try tapping the first bullet and then committing to the spray after that. It'll basically allow you to adjust your reaction without having to reset or control your recoil. And if you hit the guy, it'll also tag him so he'll move slower, meaning that your adjustment is going to be just easier. But in terms of inconsistency with your spray, you should think about going back to the basic fundamentals and working on your muscle memory. We all need to do this no matter what skill level we are. I've had times where my spray feels off, and that's because the muscle memory I've drilled into my mind was from like 8 years ago at the least. But if you go back and practice your fundamentals when you're already such a good player, you'll easily be able to master them and make yourself more consistent in doing so. Vagabond Traveller says that he's alright with his AK spray, but all of the other weapons he simply improvises. I'm obviously going to advise you to learn your spray patterns, but I can understand why you would improvise them. You know, all spray patterns are quite similar, in the sense that we all pull down and then go side to side, and when you control that spray, you can kind of feel it. It's hard to describe, but I think it's because of the screen bob effect and how we're countering that bob. But this feeling, alongside other things, can kind of direct our spray without us having to learn it. In the long run, it's really not very beneficial, but if you are a more casual player, you might rely on these things to have a good time playing without having to invest so much time in the game. If this sounds like your situation, you should try the new option where your crosshair follows the recoil. It takes like 5 seconds of getting used to, and it shows you exactly where your bullets are going. So theoretically, you can play the game whilst also learning the spray. If you do want me to make a video where I simply teach each spray pattern, I can do that, just let me know in the comments section. The only reason I haven't done that in this video is because I feel like it's quite boring and that it would be a bit repetitive. But I do understand for the people that might not have as much experience in the game, it would be nice to have someone guide you through all of the little details, even if it's a bit repetitive. But yeah, let me know. Koya says that they have a bad habit of not being confident in their ability to kill a player, and if they don't kill them in the first 5 to 6 bullets, they'll just panic crouch and hope that they kill them. This is more common than you think, and I hope that that alone makes you feel a bit more confident in yourself, because you're not alone. If you're not feeling confident in your spray duels, you need to reset your mentality. Take a step back and surrender your ego, and really narrow down what you need to work on. You said that you crouch and panic, so maybe you should go in a retake server, mute everyone, and focus on breaking that habit. If you do this, you'll notice what you're lacking in skill, because a bad habit is usually formed to compensate for exactly that. We just need to identify it. If you're crouch spraying, you'll likely be compensating either for a lack of control over your recoil, or a lack of control over your movement. For the recoil control, I hope this video has showed you how to work on that. And for the movement, you should work on the likes of counter-strafing, which I've spoken about in my ultimate aim guide, and I also plan on discussing further in a future video. So for now, let's move on to question 4. Mr. Brinky says that long-range spray transfer is inconsistent. Spray transfer is one of the most difficult aspects to master, and it should be built up through a progressive increase in difficulty. If distance is your weakness, you should work on that without the transfer in mind, and once you start to feel proficient, move on to something slightly more difficult that incorporates the transfer. You don't even have to make your target be a bot, it can be a much larger target to make it easier for you. Setting our expectations too high in practice can put us off learning and make us feel more defeated. We need to build our way up to it by rigorously practicing the easier tasks over and over again to become more consistent. But after all said and done, we also need to think, is it worth transferring our spray at such a long distance? I completely understand that it's a necessary skill, and this isn't a critique of the question, but if a fight is at a long distance, it makes it a lot easier for us to readjust and even reposition. This kind of ties into question 5. Trait G says that he struggles with consistency, transfers, and decision makings on whether to spray or burst. And as I've discussed these 2 aspects already, I want to focus on the third one here. We shouldn't really spray at a long distance, and there's not much point in bursting at close range. But where is that line that differentiates the 2? Well, it's very player dependent and situation dependent. Your skill level can define whether you should burst or spray, and either one is fine. It all comes down to how you play the situation. If you play a position that traps you in a corner after your first engagement, then you'll be forced to get a lot of impact in that initial fight. Whereas if you play a spot where you can reposition and react to the enemy's approach in various ways, then you can pick and choose your fights depending on which one is easier for you. But it's important not to pressure yourself in having the fastest time to kill. When we do that, it often leads to us panicking and whiffing. We obviously want the fastest time to kill, but it comes naturally. There are certain situations where taking your time is better. Spraying can kind of be a crutch to lean on when we actually need to aim, but we shouldn't shy away from the more difficult shots. Spraying is great, but it's also a major commitment. Sometimes we just gotta pop in and catch the sit rep. Or even if you tag a guy with your first few bullets, you don't have to stick around to commit to killing him. There's an underappreciated younger brother to the man advantage, and that's the health advantage. We've got to remember that the most important thing is for us to stay alive and for the enemies to stay weaker than us. That was a bit of a tangent, but I hope you sucked some knowledge up from it. Thank you for all the questions, by the way, and I'm sorry if I didn't answer yours, but this is everyone who commented, so you all get your appreciation in the video. Cheers. So far in this video, we've learned how to learn and control recoil from a rifle, but we should also consider learning how the other types of weapons work too. SMGs, for example, have a much better moving accuracy, meaning that when we're spraying, it's more encouraged to be moving at the same time. Although, the spread for an SMG is a lot less accurate than a rifle, so it kind of plays in a consistent middle ground. This can also reflect on the weapon's skill ceiling. Newer players who use SMGs might feel like it's the better option because it's easier to use and it's cheaper. But in reality, their skill ceiling right now might be a little bit higher, but in the future it will be severely capped, and the person who persisted with the harder weapon will find that they've unlocked many more skills due to the early learning curve they've faced. SMGs are good for eco rounds, or if you're on a half buy and want to dictate the pace. So learning SMGs is useful, but we shouldn't use them on buy rounds if we have something better available. Pistols, on the other hand, are something that we wouldn't think would have a spray pattern, but they do. And becoming aware of these patterns can be really helpful for winning our pistol rounds or doing a lot of damage on our recos. The recoil for most pistols is just a straight line going up, but when we add the spread into the mix, we have that uncontrollable variable. Although, the slower we shoot, the less the spread interferes. But interestingly enough, the movement accuracy is quite forgiving for the pistols, so it's not that bad of an idea to move around and tap fire. Obviously the best way is to counter strafe and not move at all when you shoot, but knowing what you can get away with will help you in certain situations where you simply just can't stand still. But overall, for any weapon, spray control takes time. Someone who's never played Counter-Strike will take more than a few hours to master it, so it's important for us to stay consistent. If you've never learned any kind of recoil before, spend like 20 to 30 minutes every day just shooting at a wall. I know it's grim, but you'll thank yourself in the future. And I'm going to tell you why through a little life story of mine. When I was a kid, I really wanted to play the guitar. Luckily, my stepdad was a guitarist in a band, so he started to teach me. Now, I was very young, and because of that, I was very weak. So when I try and play a chord, it would just kind of sound like a constant buzz, and that's because I wasn't pressing down hard enough on the strings. This would really frustrate me, so I'd put my pinky underneath the neck to make it easier for myself. You see, I had a boundary I was struggling with, and instead of overcoming it, I created a bad habit in order to compensate for it. But luckily, my stepdad noticed I was forming this bad habit, and he would correct it and correct it and correct it, even though my muscle memory would make me do it. But after years of him instilling it in my mind, I now have no bad habit holding me back, and I can perform to my maximum potential. And the same goes for spray control. If you build a solid foundation and instill those good habits within yourself, then a few years down the line, your time investment is going to allow you to play at your maximum potential. But yeah, thanks for watching.